Welcome to your deep dive into the life and legacy of former U.S. President Jimmy Carter. You've given us a really interesting mix of sources like biographical articles, historical overviews, even some Carter Center info.
It's really a fascinating collection.
Yeah, so we're going to uncover surprising facts and some hidden gems from all this material and hopefully help you see President Carter from some fresh angles.
It's remarkable, isn't it? The different ways Carter's life is presented.
Yeah.
From peanut farmer to nuclear engineer to peacemaker. His journey intersects with so many turning points in recent history.
Okay, let's jump right in. We know he grew up in Plains, Georgia, but did you know he lived in subsidized housing?
Yeah,
That's not something you often hear about a U.S. president.
it's true. And that upbringing in Plains seems to have really shaped his values. You can see it in his focus on community and commitment to social justice.
And then there's his time in the Navy.
Right.
I mean, not just graduating from the U.S. Naval Academy, but serving in the submarine service.
And get this, he was involved in a top-secret nuclear reactor cleanup in Canada. Imagine the intensity of that experience, a young Jimmy Carter working on a project with such high stakes.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder how that shaped his views on nuclear energy, because later on he actually halted development of the neutron bomb during his presidency in the middle of the Cold War. That seems like an incredibly gutsy call.
It certainly was. The neutron bomb was very controversial. Advocates saw it as a tactical advantage, but critics, including Carter, feared it would lower the threshold for using nuclear weapons. And his decision to stop its development, despite pushback from some military advisors, really highlights his commitment to nuclear nonproliferation.
So he leaves the Navy, and what does he do? Goes back to Georgia to run the family peanut farm.
Yeah.
Seems like quite a change from nuclear reactors.
But remember, Carter was always deeply rooted in his community. Taking over the family business wasn't just about peanuts. It was about contributing to the economic well-being of his hometown. And you can see that same commitment to community later on, of course, with the Carter Center and his humanitarian work.
And all the while, he's getting more involved in local politics, but not without some setbacks. I mean, his 1966 run for governor, a loss against segregationist Lester Maddox.
Oh, yeah.
What a blow that must have been.
You would think so, right?
Ugh.
It was seen as a devastating defeat at the time, but looking back, that loss actually seemed to have been a turning point. It spurred a period of deep personal reflection and a renewed commitment to his faith. And that experience seems to have fueled his drive and laid the groundwork for his eventual success.
Wow, so a major setback becomes a catalyst. That's something we can all relate to, right? Sometimes what feels like the worst thing that could happen actually ends up setting you on a more fulfilling path.
Exactly. And we see that resilience play out as he continues in politics, eventually winning the governorship in 1970. And during his time as governor, we really start to see those progressive policies and government reforms take shape. It's almost like he's laying the groundwork for a national platform.
Okay, so let's talk about that national platform. Because in 1976, Jimmy Carter enters the presidential race. And let's be honest, he's a bit of a dark horse. I mean, his campaign slogan was literally Jimmy Who.
Yeah. But think about how brilliant that was. It acknowledged his lack of name recognition, but turned it into an asset. Remember, this was post-Watergate. People were disillusioned with politics as usual. And here comes Carter, positioning himself as an outsider, untainted by scandal, promising change and a more streamlined government. It was a message that resonated.
And it's amazing how media coverage can shape an election. They picked up on his outsider status and his appeal to conservative Christians and rural voters.
Oh, yeah.
It definitely helped propel him to the forefront.
It's a fascinating example of how media narratives intersect with public perception, particularly in a time of national disillusionment. It really shaped the entire election cycle.
And somehow, despite being this relatively unknown figure, he manages to secure the Democratic nomination and then win the presidency, albeit narrowly, against Gerald Ford. That's got to be a testament to the power of a well-run campaign that taps into the mood of the nation, right?
Absolutely. And it's here, with Carter entering the White House in 1977, that things get really interesting. Because almost immediately, he starts making some pretty bold moves.
Like the Pardon for All Vietnam War draft evaders, it was a controversial decision, but it showed his commitment to healing those deep divisions from the Vietnam War. You can really see him trying to bridge that gap.
And then there's his focus on energy independence. He establishes a national energy policy centered on conservation, price control, and new technology. All this at a time when the nation is facing a serious energy crisis.
He also creates the Departments of Energy and Education, signaling a real shift in priorities.
Yeah.
He's definitely not afraid to shake things up.
He's trying to push the country in a new direction, that's for sure. But it doesn't take long for him to run into some major obstacles. We can't talk about Carter without addressing the economic challenges he faced, especially stagflation.
Right, that awful combination of economic stagnation and inflation. What a nightmare. I mean, how do you even begin to tackle something like that?
It was a truly complex problem, and sadly, it plagued his presidency from beginning to end. Stagflation is tough to combat because the traditional tools for fighting inflation can actually worsen unemployment, and vice versa. Carter tried a mix of approaches, focusing on energy conservation, deregulation in some sectors, and even voluntary wage and price controls. But the economy just didn't respond the way he hoped.
And then, on top of everything else, the Iran hostage crisis unfolds. It's hard to imagine a more difficult situation for a president to deal with American hostages held captive in Iran for 444 days. It just dominated the news cycle and overshadowed everything else.
That crisis really cast a long shadow over his presidency. It's easy to forget now, but there was a sense of national helplessness and frustration. The failed rescue attempt, the constant media coverage, it all contributed to a sense that Carter was losing control of the situation.
It's almost tragic, in a way. A president with so much potential, so many good intentions, gets bogged down by forces beyond his control.
And there's a real what-if element to it all. Recently declassified CIA documents suggest that Iranian hardliners may have deliberately prolonged the crisis to sabotage Carter's re-election chances. Imagine that international events being influenced by domestic political calculations.
I know.
It's a chilling thought.
So the question is, if Carter hadn't faced this crisis, if the hostage situation hadn't unfolded, how would his presidency be remembered today? Would we be looking at his accomplishments in a completely different light?
That's a fascinating question, and it really gets to the heart of how we evaluate a president's legacy. We'll explore that in more detail after the break. Makes you wonder, doesn't it, how different events might be if just one or two key things had gone another way.
Yeah.
But let's not forget that despite facing, some really immense challenges, Carter accomplished some really remarkable things during his presidency, especially when you look at foreign policy.
Yeah, absolutely. The Camp David Accords immediately come to mind. He managed to broker a peace treaty between Israel and Egypt,
Right.
two countries that had been at war for decades.
Yeah.
It was a huge achievement.
It's easy to underestimate the significance of that event. Carter's personal involvement was critical. He spent 13 days sequestered with Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and Israeli Prime Minister Menachem, mediating, negotiating, pushing for compromise, and his ability to bring these two leaders together to find common ground where others had failed. It really speaks volumes about his diplomatic skills.
It was a huge win for peace in the Middle East. And it wasn't just the Camp David Accords. He also championed human rights on a global scale, opened diplomatic relations with China, worked on arms control agreements with the Soviet Union.
Yeah, you can definitely see a pattern emerging here, whether it's peace in the Middle East, human rights, nuclear non-proliferation. Carter consistently prioritized diplomacy and cooperation over military intervention.
Yeah.
It's a very different approach to foreign policy than some of his predecessors.
Okay, so let's shift gears and dive into his post-presidency, because here's where things get really fascinating. I mean, Carter has had the longest post-presidency of any U.S. president in history.
And it hasn't been a quiet retirement by any means. The Carter Center, which he founded with Rosalind Carter, has been incredibly active in advancing human rights and global health. They've truly made a global impact.
I was reading about their work, and it's astounding. They've conducted peace negotiations in conflict zones, monitored elections in emerging democracies, and spearheaded the near eradication of guinea worm disease. It's like they're tackling the world's toughest challenges head on.
What's striking is their holistic approach. They don't just focus on symptoms. They address root causes. For example, with guinea worm, it wasn't simply about providing medication. They focused on education, community engagement, and improving access to clean water sources. They recognize that long-term solutions require a multifaceted strategy.
And all of that led to him winning the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002. It's clear that his commitment to peace and humanitarianism went way beyond his time in the White House. It's almost like his presidency was just one chapter in a much larger story of service.
I think that's a really insightful observation. His post-presidency has, in many ways, redefined how we view the role of a former president. It's not just about giving speeches and writing memoirs. It's about continuing to use your platform and your experience to make a difference in the world.
And he's also been outspoken on current events, writing books on everything from faith and ethics to his views on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He hasn't been afraid to challenge conventional wisdom and spark debate.
That's part of what makes him so fascinating. He's never stopped learning, never
Yeah.
stopped engaging with the world, and he's been willing to evolve his positions on certain issues, which is remarkable for someone so deeply rooted in his faith and values.
It's also worth highlighting his personal life. He's been married to Rosalind Carter for over 75 years. That's an
Mm.
incredible partnership. They've worked side by side on so many projects, from the Carter Center to Habitat for Humanity.
Their commitment to each other and to their shared values is truly remarkable. It's a testament to the power of a long-lasting partnership built on mutual respect and a shared vision.
And of course, we can't talk about Jimmy Carter without acknowledging the role his Christian faith has played in his life. He taught Sunday school for many years and even brought his faith into the political sphere, openly discussing it during his 1976 campaign.
Yeah, his decision to speak openly about his faith was really groundbreaking at the time. It challenged the notion that faith and politics should be kept separate, and it certainly resonated with a large segment of the American electorate.
He's someone who really walks the walk. His faith isn't just something he talks about, it's deeply embedded in his actions and his approach to leadership.
He's also demonstrated a remarkable willingness to stick to his principles, even when it wasn't popular or politically expedient.
So, looking at Jimmy Carter's life as a whole, what can we learn from him? What are the key takeaways?
Well, I think it's safe to say that his life is a testament to the power of resilience, dedication, and an unwavering commitment to one's values. He's shown us that true leadership isn't just about holding positions of power. It's about using your influence to make a positive impact on the world. And Carter has definitely done that.
He truly embodies the idea of a life well lived. He's achieved success in politics, diplomacy, humanitarian work, and even in his personal life, it's an incredibly inspiring story.
And what's particularly fascinating is how his legacy has evolved over time. While his presidency faced its fair share of challenges, his post-presidency work has earned him widespread admiration. It makes you wonder how we measure the success of a leader. Should it be solely based on their time in office, or should we consider their entire life's work?
That's a great question. It's something we should all consider. But, there's another aspect of Carter's story that I find really intriguing, his humility despite all his accomplishments. He's always seemed grounded and approachable. There's that famous story of him carrying his own luggage onto Air Force One. Do you remember that?
Oh, absolutely. It's a powerful image. It speaks to his down-to-earth nature and it's a belief that he's no different from anyone else. It's a quality that's often missing in today's leaders, wouldn't you say?
It really is. And it makes you wonder, with all his experience on the world stage, from the Cold War to the rise of global terrorism, what does someone like Jimmy Carter think about today's political climate?
Well, he's certainly not been shy about voicing his opinions. He's been quite critical of certain trends in American politics, particularly the influence of money and the erosion of democratic norms.
And it's not just partisan griping. His critiques come from a place of genuine concern for the future of democracy. He sees these issues as fundamental threats to the health of our political system.
What's interesting is that his perspective seems to resonate across party lines. He's not speaking as a Democrat or Republican, but as an elder statesman who's deeply worried about the direction the country is headed.
Yeah, his voice seems more relevant now than ever. We're living in a time of such intense polarization and dysfunction. His emphasis on moral leadership and ethical governance feels like a much-needed antidote to the cynicism and negativity that dominates so much of our political discourse.
He reminds us that politics at its core should be about serving the common good. It's about putting people before party and principles before power. It's a message that's easy to forget in the heat of a political campaign or a partisan battle.
It's a message that should resonate with anyone in public service, whether you're a local school board member or a U.S. senator.
And it's a message that I think resonates with a lot of people who are just tired of the political gamesmanship and the constant bickering. They're looking for leaders who are genuine, who have integrity, and who are truly committed to making the world a better place, leaders like Jimmy Carter.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Jimmy Carter's life and legacy, what's the one thing you hope our listener takes away from all of this?
I think it's the simple but powerful idea that one person can make a difference. Carter's life is a testament to all, that he's shown us that it's possible to live a life of purpose and meaning, to make a real impact on the world, both within and beyond the realm of politics. His journey is an inspiration to us all, to find our own ways to contribute to a more just and peaceful world.
Well said. And remember, Carter's story is still being written even as he enters his twilight years. He continues to inspire us with his unwavering commitment to service and his belief in the potential for positive change. It's a legacy that will continue to impact the world for generations to come. It really is. And it makes you wonder, with all his experience on the world stage, from the Cold War to the rise of global terrorism, What does someone like Jimmy Carter think about today's political climate?
We've certainly not been shy about voicing his opinions. He's been quite critical of certain trends in American politics, particularly the influence of money and the erosion of democratic norms.
It's not just partisan griping. His critiques come from a place of genuine concern for the future of democracy. He sees these issues as fundamental threats to the health of our political system.
What's interesting is that his perspective seems to resonate across party lines. He's not speaking as a Democrat or a Republican, but as an elder statesman who's deeply worried about the direction the country is headed.
Yeah, his voice seems more relevant now than ever. I mean, we're living in a time of such intense polarization and dysfunction. His emphasis on moral leadership and ethical governance feels like a much-needed antidote to the cynicism and negativity that dominate so much of our political discourse.
He reminds us that politics at its core should be about serving the common good. It's about putting people before party and principles before power.
Mm.
You know, it's a message that's easy to forget in the heat of a political campaign or a partisan battle.
It's a message that should resonate with anyone in public service, whether you're a local school board member or a U.S. senator.
And it's a message that I think resonates with a lot of people who are just tired of the political gamesmanship and the constant bickering.
Hmm.
They're looking for leaders who are genuine, who have integrity, and who are truly committed to making the world a better place. Leaders like Jimmy Carter.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Jimmy Carter's life and legacy, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
I think it's the simple but powerful idea that one person can make a difference. Carter's life is a testament to that. He's shown us that it's possible to live a life of purpose and meaning, to make a real impact on the world, both within and beyond the realm of politics. His journey is an inspiration to us all to find our own ways to contribute to a more just and peaceful world.
Well said. And remember, Carter's story is still being written even as he enters his twilight years. He continues to inspire us with his unwavering commitment to service and his belief in the potential for positive change. It's a legacy that will continue to impact the world for generations to come.